According to Insta360, compared to its predecessor, the new X5 offers recording times 37% longer. Not only that, but when the battery is depleted, it will charge it up almost twice as fast. Too good to be true? Let's find out. So here it is, the brand new Insta360 X5. Now, I just posted my first impressions review on the channel a couple of days ago, and as promised, this is one of several follow-ups, and today's topic is all about battery performance. We'll cover some background information, we'll do some testing to see how close we can get to the claimed performance, compare it to the performance of the X4, and cover a few other things that you need to know about battery performance on the X5. Now, there's a lot to cover, so I'll place the chapters up here and on the video timeline, but before we get into it, this. Before we continue with today's video, a quick disclaimer. This video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. I purchased all of the equipment with my own money, and the opinions are entirely my own. Now, I do include links to the featured products as well as my recording equipment. These may appear throughout the video and in the video description. If you purchase using these links, I may make a commission, and this is what helps fund the channel, but rest assured there is no price disadvantage to you. You are getting the best price I can find. Alternatively, if you want to support the channel, you could follow this link and buy me a coffee. And of course, if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. So back to the video. Just as we've seen with every new generation of the X series, when they introduced the X5, Insta360 also introduced a new and higher capacity battery. And that really pisses me off. And let me explain why. You see, if you place the X5 and the X4 side by side, you'll see that they are basically identical in size. And as a result, the batteries are also basically the same exact size and shape, with one key exception, and that is the location of the connection port. Of course, as a result, there is zero cross-compatibility between the batteries and chargers of the X5 and the X4. So if, like me, you have multiple batteries and chargers for your X4 and you upgrade to the X5, you have to buy all those batteries and chargers all over again. Now, you may be thinking, well, yes, but you have now a higher capacity battery which gives you much longer run times on the X5. Well, it's not quite that simple. You see, the claimed runtime improvement going from the X4 to the X5 is up to 37%. But if you look at the capacity of the two batteries, it's a less than 5% increase. So the runtime improvement is not really coming from the battery, it's something that's happening in the camera, and we'll talk more about that later. As far as the battery is concerned, either they've managed to cram a few more cells into the new battery, which, given the fact that it is a gram lighter than the old one, is unlikely. Far more likely is they've just used more higher efficiency cells. In either case, I think it was completely unnecessary to move the location of the connection port, making the new battery incompatible with the X4. In my opinion, it would have been preferable to just use the exact same battery as on the X4. Personally, I would gladly forgo the added 4.8% capacity increase in order to have batteries and chargers that were cross-compatible between both cameras. So why did they do it this way? Well, there's really just two possibilities. The first being that they just simply didn't think about it, which is bad enough. But the second one, if I'm being cynical, is that they did it deliberately to force users to buy new batteries and new chargers when they move to the new platform. Either way, this is pretty poor on the part of Insta360, and there's something they need to address going forward if they don't want to alienate their user base. And it's important to note that it's not just about the cost of buying the new accessories. Many users, myself included, keep and use multiple cameras. So now when I carry around my X4 and X5, I have to also carry around a completely separate kit of batteries and chargers for each camera. Okay, Complaints about the battery aside, I do need to give Insta360 some credit for what they've done in terms of the battery performance on the X5. I mean, you have a sensor which is 2.5 times the size, and of course there's two of them, and also they've increased the processing power about 2.5 times compared to the X4, all of which places additional demands on the battery, and yet in spite of that they've managed to improve the battery performance compared to the X4, and that is pretty impressive. Now, it's not quite as impressive as Insta360 would have you believe. If you take a look at the web page and all the marketing information, the claim is 37% longer runtimes than the X4, but this is a little bit misleading because it applies only to a very specific filming situation, and that is 5.7K using what's called endurance mode. Now, endurance mode is a power saving mode, and we saw this introduced on the Ace Pro 2. And what it does is it disables certain power-hungry functions like voice control, gesture control, and so on, and it also places some limits on your settings. In fact, let me give you the details of those limitations. So when you use endurance mode, first of all, it only works in the following modes: video mode, loop recording mode, road mode, and photo mode, and it disables the following features: active HDR, AI highlights assist, gesture control, voice control, twist to shoot, low light enhancements, timed capture, face priority, voice enhancement, auto wind noise reduction strong, iLog, efficiency mode, that's the H.265 encoding, use of presets, and dive case mode. So all of these features are disabled when using the endurance mode. And there's one other key limitation: you are limited to 5.7K resolution at up to 30 frames per second. So endurance mode comes with quite a few sacrifices in terms of performance and features, and frankly I don't see myself using endurance mode too often. But if you do use endurance mode, then you can get up to 37% longer runtimes than the X4, because of course the X4 does not have endurance mode. Although when you think about it, endurance mode is only restricting you, so there's really no reason they couldn't put endurance mode on the X4 also. Now, with all that said, even without the endurance mode, it looks like the X5 should be as good, if not slightly better than the X4 when it comes to runtime performance. But that's something we'll find out in our testing section. The other battery performance improvement offered by the X5 compared to the X4 is faster charging. Now, the X4 was no slouch here either, allowing you to charge the battery in camera from 0 to 80% in 38 minutes and all the way to 100% in 55 minutes. And the X4's batteries were also fast charge capable by using the external charging hub. Well, now the X5 offers that fast charging capability in camera. And the claim is it will get you from 0 to 80% in just 20 minutes and fully charged in 35 minutes. Almost twice as fast as the X4. And of course we'll do some testing to confirm those values also. Okay, time to do some testing, starting out with the runtime tests. Now, the only specification we have to compare against is using the settings we talked about a moment ago, 5.7K using the endurance mode. And using those settings, Insta360 claims we should see a pretty impressive runtime of 185 minutes. Now, frankly, I didn't purchase the X5 to run it at 5.7K in endurance mode. In order to get the best possible results, I plan on using 8K or at least 5.7K HDR at 60 frames per second, so we'll be testing those modes also. Now, although I don't have any specifications in terms of the runtimes using those modes, about a year ago I did run all those same tests on the X4, so it will be very interesting to see how the X5 compares against the X4. And there is one other performance aspect that we need to compare against the X4, and that is heat dissipation. When I ran these tests on the X4, specifically at 8K resolution, my tests were generally interrupted due to the camera overheating. So here too, we'll see how the X5 performs compared to the X4. So let's start out with our first test, and that is the 8K test. Okay, time to do some battery life testing on the X5. Now, if you're familiar with the channel, you'll know my just for fun battery life testing setup here. Basically, I have the camera filming itself together with a stopwatch so we get that nice visual of when the time runs out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to power on the camera. It is fully charged, so we're going to power it on, immediately start recording. I have it currently set up for 8K 30 frames per second. And at the same time, of course, we're going to start the stopwatch and see exactly how long it runs for. Now, this is the very first battery life test I've done on the X5, so I'm not sure at the moment if we're doing a battery life test or an overheating test. That remains to be seen. This is a relatively cool basement room. It is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, about 20 degrees centigrade. So let's just start it up and see how long we get. And let's see how long we get. So just as we saw with the X4, in this particular test in a relatively cool room but without airflow, the X5 overheated and shut down. Now it did do better than the X4. When I ran the same tests on the X4, the best I could get was 67 minutes before it shut down due to overheating. So at 1 hour 18 minutes, this is about a 16% improvement. But nevertheless, you do have to be aware that with the X5 also, if you are recording in 8K, you may experience shutdowns due to overheating, particularly if you are filming in a warm environment or you do not have airflow over the camera. So in order to continue on with the test, I removed the battery and gave the camera a good 20 minutes or so to cool down, reinserted the battery and continued the test, and let's pick it up from there. Now once again, compared to the X4, this is a pretty decent result. Using the same conditions on the X4, I was only able to get 1 hour and 17 minutes, so the X5 does give you about 9% longer runtime when recording in 8K. And remember, the capacity of the new battery is only 5% more, so it's pretty impressive that despite the much larger sensor and much higher processing power, that Insta360 have managed to extract even more runtime out of the battery. But what about that 185-minute runtime claim? Well, I set up the camera in 5.7K, turned on the endurance mode and repeated the test. Okay, and now we are recording at 5.7K. I have enabled the endurance mode, so according to Insta360, this should get us over 3 hours of recording time. So let's see what we get. So not quite the 3 hours and 5 minutes advertised, but 2 hours and 50 minutes is a pretty respectable result and significantly longer than what we saw with the X4. When I performed a similar test on the X4 at 5.7K, I was able to run for 2 hours and 19 minutes. So not quite the 37% increase that Insta360 claimed, but still a 22% increase is not a bad result. Now, of course, this result was achieved using the new endurance mode, which the X4 does not have, so I did repeat the test at 5.7K, but with endurance mode turned off to see what the difference would be. And with endurance mode turned off, the battery gave up after less than 2 hours, or 1 hour and 58 minutes to be precise, which is actually about 15% less than I was able to get on the X4. Now, I did do one additional test at 5.7K 60 frames per second, and here too I was interested to see not only how long the battery would last, but also whether we would encounter any overheating problems. But I'm happy to report that just like the X4, running at 5.7K 60 frames per second did not result in any overheating problems. We were able to run until battery depletion at 1 hour and 29 minutes, which here too was a little bit less than we saw on the X4, about 5% less than the X4, which managed to achieve 1 hour and 34 minutes. And here you can see the results of all 4 tests, also in comparison to similar tests on the X4. Okay, so let's now turn our attention to the charging performance. Now, when it comes to charging, there are basically 2 things we want to test against. Firstly, the claimed fast charging performance of the X5. According to Insta360, this will allow you to charge the battery from 0 to 80% in just 20 minutes and all the way to 100% in 35 minutes. And of course, in addition to testing against these claims, we also want to compare the charging performance against the X4. So my test setup was pretty straightforward. I basically plugged in the camera to charge and started the clock. And obviously having the visual display of the charge status makes my testing a lot easier. Although I will say I'm not quite sure why you have to press the button to see the charge status. I would much prefer they had an always on type display such as you'll find on the DJI Pocket 3. It allows you to see the charge status at all times, and I'm sure it doesn't draw that much power to do that. So the results of the charging test were pretty mixed and frankly quite disappointing. In only one of my test runs was I able to get even remotely close to the claimed performance from Insta360. In that test at the 20-minute mark we had reached 68% charge, and it took until about 26 minutes before we reached 80%, although the 100% mark was a bit closer. At the 35-minute mark, we managed to make it to 94% charge, and it only took a couple of minutes longer to get us all the way to 100%. Now, as I said, this was the one and only time I was able to get close to the claimed performance. In most of my other tests, I was seeing charge times to 80% around 35 to 40 minutes, and as much as an hour to get the battery fully charged. During several of the tests, I did measure the charging power. It occasionally got up as far as around 25 to 27 watts, which is the kind of power I would expect to see for fast charging. But most of the time it was in the 10 to 15 watt range. And important to note that yes, I was using fast chargers capable of providing the 9 volts 3 amps that Insta360 specified. I tried using different cables, including the one that Insta360 provided with the X5, and I also double checked using other cameras that my charging setup was delivering the required 25 to 30 watts. Now, when I ran these same tests on the X4, I was indeed able to confirm the specifications from Insta360, charging from 0 to 80% in around 37 minutes and all the way to 100% in 58 minutes. So based on these tests at least, I'm really not seeing that fast charging capability. I'm really seeing about the same performance as we saw on the X4. Now, it's possible, of course, that my particular X5 has some kind of fault with the USB port. I will be following up with Insta360 on these results, and if I get any updates, I'll be sure to post those. So, some pretty interesting and mixed results as far as the battery performance is concerned. As far as the runtime tests are concerned, now if you didn't notice the captions, when I ran the endurance test at 5.7K, I had the camera set to 30 frames per second, whereas the specification was based on 24 frames per second, so that would probably explain why I only got 170 minutes versus the claimed 185 minutes. So overall, I would say we did actually confirm Insta360 specifications as far as the runtime is concerned. And also looking at the other test results, Again, I do find it pretty impressive. When you look at the difference between the X5 and the X4, you've got much larger sensors, you have significantly higher processing power, yet they've managed to fit it into the same form factor with little or no sacrifice in runtimes, and also as good if not better performance when it comes to the overheating issue. Now, when it comes to the charging results, there I'm not so convinced. Now, it's possible I just have a bad unit, and I will definitely be following up to find out if that is the case, and I will be sure to post any updates into the comment section, and if necessary, post a follow-up video. But basically, from my testing, I was not able to consistently confirm the fast charging capability of the X5 in most of my tests. Charging took significantly longer than the claimed specifications and was pretty much on a par with the X4. Now, an important point to bring up here regarding charging the X5, it seems that you really do need to have a high power charger in order to be able to charge the X5 at all. Based on my findings and also some comments that I've already seen online, it seems if you have a low power charger or a low power power bank, this may not provide sufficient voltage to charge the X5 at all. And that even includes something like the power selfie stick that comes from Insta360 themselves. It would appear that the power selfie stick does not have sufficient power to be able to provide any charge to the X5. I've had this plugged in a while now. If you'll notice, the charging lamp is actually on, but every time I check the status, the light goes out and the charge status has not updated at all. So again, this could just be my X5, but so far I am not convinced about the fast charging capability of the X5, and frankly I'm a little concerned about how sensitive it is to different chargers. So that wraps it up for another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. If you have any questions, any comments, if you want to share your experience or make suggestions for future videos, please drop those into the comments section. Otherwise, thanks again for watching.